I'm Sharon Caddy, and joining us in studio we have a couple of guests. Colin Campbell is our guest, but so is George. And Colin, welcome to What She Said.
Thanks for having us.
It's such a pleasure, and I've been so excited to have you come in. The book, Free Days with George, and first of all, before we get into it, I got to say, I'm hoping at some point there's a movie out of this, because it's, what a story you have to tell.
It's yeah, it is pretty crazy, and interestingly enough, yeah, it's drawn some attention of some movie companies.
I'm not surprised at all. So, boy, where do I want? I think I want to start though with the title, and because in the book you really get into the definition of what free days are and where that comes from. Could you give us some background, because it's a wonderful story?
Sure. So when I was a little boy, I have a younger brother. My grandfather used to tell us about free days, and basically where it comes from is that he's a World War II veteran. He was one of the first to land in Normandy on D-Day on Juno Beach, and he survived it. And but part of that day is he saw a lot of trauma and a lot of real, ugly, difficult things as part of that war. And he made a promise to himself that, if he ever made it back and lived through the war, that he would build a cottage in Nova Scotia where he did his training. And he lived through the war, and he stayed true to his promise. So when we were little kids, we used to go to his cottage every summer that he built when he returned. And we would spend a day with him, every day with him in the summer, basically building sandcastles and flying kites and going swimming. And when you're 5 or 6 years of age, I mean, those are things you do.
That's the best things to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And at night, every night almost, he would tuck us in and read a story. And he'd say, "Boys, did you have a good day today?" And we'd say, "Yeah, Grandpa, it was awesome." And he said, "Well, when you do things you love to do, like building sandcastles and swimming with people who love you, that's a free day. You don't get old, so you have a free day on Earth."
I love that.
So, and when we were 5, we go, "Okay, that's good." You have no idea. But as you get older and life catches up and you have responsibilities and you pay bills or you face traumatic situations, the appreciation for days becomes more apparent.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's basically what the book's about.
Well, for people who haven't read the book, tell us how you and George came to be a team, because people don't. They will run out and I'm sure buy the book. But
oh yeah.
Well, the book's doing quite well. It was on the Globe and Mail bestseller list 2 weeks ago, which was pretty exciting. But how George and I got together is, my wife at the time suddenly left. I mean, we broke up, and she basically came home one day and said that she didn't want to be married anymore. There wasn't a lot of explanation behind it, and there wasn't a lot of discussion afterwards.
So pretty traumatic.
And very unexpected. I was happily married and very...
I'll interject. When you read the book, that chapter, if that doesn't bring you to... it brought me to tears, that part. So just anyway, continue. I just have to mention that to Christine. You got to read this.
Well, that was a hard chapter to write.
I could only imagine.
But it was important because it kind of validates the rest of the journey, and how when things go badly, and everyone at some point faces some adversity in their lives, and this was my adversity, and I struggled with it. So one of the things that my friends were concerned about me, because I became fairly reclusive after that happened, is they said, "Look, you're alone in your nice big house and you've got a nice big yard. You should get a dog. You need some company." Because outside of work, I wasn't really wanting to do too much, and so I reluctantly sort of agreed, because I was in a downward spiral to some degree, and I found George on a website called petfinder.com, and a friend of mine had alerted me to this big homeless Newfoundland who needed a home, and he looked sad in his picture, and I thought I could do him a favor and help him and share my home with him, and that's sort of how it all started. And I thought at first I was doing him a favor because he had been neglected and abused.
So you thought you were going to save him.
Right, and I think initially I did. I mean, he did need a home. But it was funny, because the whole journey about the whole thing about free days is that over time he got better, and the book chronicles how we went through that process. And at first he didn't trust me, he didn't trust a lot of people. Like I said, he'd had some issues that made mine look quite pale. But as the book goes on, and as the months went on, I was really still struggling with some depression, and George got better. And when he realized that I was struggling, he started returning that favor. So, you know, he was making me go out and do things every day that I wouldn't have done.
Which is so wonderful. But through even the darkest times, I mean, I know that your grandfather is always a present force in your life, even though he's long gone.
Right.
But he's always a present force in your life. But even and in those darkest of times, did you ever really lose sight of the voice of your grandfather, or was it always there, just maybe not seeming attainable at times?
Well, you know, when life's good, you tend just to kind of, you know, live in the moment and try and move on to the next good thing or the next task. So, you know, I had a busy career and it was pretty successful at the time, and so yeah, you don't really stop and smell the roses, so to speak. And so I didn't really. I've always been close to my grandfather, but those lessons when I was a kid weren't really at the top of my thought process. But when I was struggling with depression, not even knowing I was depressed at the time, then yeah, his advice when I was a little kid certainly became more relevant. And then with George and all of the issues that he was facing, it even became that much more relevant. So we sort of had this bonding moment where you stop and you have to think about those positive things in order to sort of brush off the dust and get going with life.
You brought up something before, which I think is key in a healthy psyche, and key for all healthy relationships, and really key for people to be happy, which is trust. And trust is a really, really hard thing to find again when you've lost it.
Right.
And this seems to me to be the theme, the thing that you both had to learn to trust again.
Absolutely, and that's a great observation. And the book is really about regaining trust, not only in other people, and in my case, in a dog. And you know, obviously he had to learn how to trust people who had been neglectful to him. But it's also about the love that goes with it, and how you really earn that trust. And you know, the simple reality is that over time, I started to love this dog, and the more I loved him, the more he trusted me.
But the more you trusted him and the more you loved him, did that translate then into human relationships? Because I think when people have gone through the trauma that you went through, they're not very trusting.
That's true.
Of other people.
Yeah.
Because you've been hurt by somebody. But did you relearn?
Well, I don't go too much about that into the book.
No, but I'm asking.
Yeah, I struggled with it.
Of course.
You know, I'll admit, I mean, I certainly, when I moved to Los Angeles, had some opportunities to re-enter the dating world. But, you know, anyone who leaves a marriage unexpectedly and not at your own decision, I mean, I think when you leave one, my sense that I've had a few friends who've gone through it and they've sort of instigated it, there's a bit more empowerment to that process. But if you're on the wrong end of it...
You were blindsided.
Right.
Yeah.
It's way harder.
Rejection is a tough...
Right. And so, I mean, it wasn't just trust issues that I had to deal with. I had my own confidence issues, for that matter, because I had such a lovely marriage prior to her leaving. And so, I struggled with it a bit. And to be honest, the silver lining actually came in some parts. I went to a therapist, and being very candid, I talk about that in the book, which was a really smart thing to do, because I never in a million years thought I would need to take that step, but it was extremely helpful. And, and I think even writing this book was pretty cathartic. So yeah, now I'm in a much healthier, happier state, and it's a nice ending to what was a tough time.
Yeah. Now George has turned out to be a surprise in some ways, and especially as we even see on the back cover, George surfs.
Yeah, he does. Surfs better than I do.
Well, what does George not do?
I know.
I guess he doesn't drive.
No, he's tried that.
He's tried that. Yeah, it'd be hard to take over. He would take over the car, but the surfing thing, that was kind of interesting how that all came to be.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So he's a Newfoundland, and they're bred to save drowning fishermen back in Newfoundland back in hundreds of years ago. And that breed is one of a handful of Canadian breeds indigenous to Canada, and so they learned how to swim in the North Atlantic, hauling nets, saving fishermen. So when we went to California, he had never been in the ocean before, and so I had grown up in Nova Scotia, and I had surfed a bit when I was a kid. So living in California, I got a surfboard and I started going out, but George would follow me because he's like Velcro. And instead of swimming beside me, which is what I thought he would do, he he insisted on getting on the board.
I think that's so funny.
I know.
So he would climb up on the board and pull his paws up, and then I would help him. I'd lift his rear up onto the board and then paddle back in. These are big Pacific Ocean waves, and I thought for sure he would just bail and he'd get scared, or there were big waves, and I was concerned, but he never flinched. And so he just sort of took to it. He was never taught it. He loved it. He was fearless. And then every year in California, in Huntington Beach, they have a California dog surfing championship.
Yeah.
Because it's California, and they do quirky things like that. And so we went in it because it was to raise money for homeless dogs, of which he was one. And I thought we'd go in and spend the day and just sort of have fun and raise some money for a good cause. And I might meet some people. I really didn't know too many people when I moved there. And, at the end of the day, he was voted the most popular dog on the beach. And there was like 120 dogs and 4,000 people. And it was a big deal. It was shocking.
So does he actually surf on his own, or he's on the board with you?
Well, he needs me to position him in the wave and push him when the wave comes and time it. But he stays on the board on his own.
Crazy balance.
But he's very seaworthy, I guess is the right way to describe him. He's fearless in the water. All Newfoundlands are, or most Newfoundlands are. And so I like to surf with him. We have a big 11-foot floaty board, and the two of us get on, and we go out to Nova Scotia in the summertime, and we surf together, and no one bothers us, and it's sort of our thing. But in California, it's a bit of a spectacle, and there'd be people taking pictures, and he's got a big Facebook following.
Oh, you're kidding!
He's having a blast down here on
Yeah,
the floor.
I know.
I got to tell you, he's rolling around and just having a wonderful time.
You can hear him.
Oh my God, look at him! Oh, George, you're awesome. Oh, what a doll!
We're ready to take him home.
I think we got to fight on our
Yeah, I
hands.
know, absolutely. And he wouldn't go anywhere with us anyway, Sharon.
No, I know.
He would for a few minutes. He would eventually try and find me, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
What
he's
a
very friendly.
sweetheart.
He's very sweet.
So, any chance of getting another dog?
Now
Now that you've had this great experience with him, or is it just enough, this love story?
right now I think it's enough, and I think if I maybe someday down the road I would consider it. I mean, I would certainly encourage other people who deal with some. There he is. Sounds like.
Yeah.
I would encourage other people to adopt a rescue dog like George. I mean, it can change your life in a positive way, and then obviously it saves the life of the dog itself. And at some point, maybe I'll consider that, but I think for now I'm pretty happy with George the way he is.
So have you had some feedback from organizations or who enable that, or from people who have adopted rescue dogs and going through a rough time in life and then found that it was just life-changing for them?
Right. Well, the book's been out for 2 weeks now, and I've been getting dozens of emails through Free Days with George, the Facebook page, unsolicited comments from people, and they send me pictures of the dogs they've adopted and how the dogs have impacted their lives. So, I think it's a story that resonates with a lot of people, even non-dog lovers. I mean, unfortunately, statistically, half the adult population goes through a divorce, and so a lot of people have commented it's a nice way to manage it.
And you have the Facebook page. You also have a really nice website as well with some beautiful pictures of you and George, and it's lovely.
Thank you.
Absolutely lovely.
So Free Days with George can be purchased almost anywhere.
Yeah, it's in independent bookstores from coast to coast. It's at Chapters and Indigo, and online also.
And here at the
Amazon.
website.
Yep.
There you go. See? Buy the book. That's perfect. Colin Campbell, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for bringing George. This made my day. Absolutely made my day.
Well, thank you very much for having both of us.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.